With this adaptation, more like Kaiju number great, am I right? No, but really, the adaptation has taken some liberties with the art, but it's making these action sequences look crazy good with the low detail design and the CG terrain, making for some really cool camera work, even if it does, you know, give them the potato body sometimes. And God, I love all things kaiju. I've been a huge Godzilla fan for most of my life. Funnily enough, probably starting with the fighting games, and then going into movies that are, let's be honest, as silly as getting into Godzilla for the fighting game. Huh. And Mr. 8 over here is doing great with the intrigue and the spectacle, and it's been a while since we've had a good Monster of the Week show. Huh. Wait a minute. So you know that Monster of the Week format a lot of older shows use? Kaiju number 8 made me realize something about it. More specifically, episodic content in general, when compared against serial content. Episodic, where nothing changes at the end of each episode, i.e. a lot of gag anime, SpongeBob, the status on Elder Scrolls 6. And then there's serialized, where episodes flow from one to the other. Like, most anime fall in this category. There's also some Western shows like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Captain Crunch. And growing up, I watched as much cartoons as the next kid around. But around the time I watched these shows, more specifically this one, it kind of ruined how I could watch shows moving forward. I mean, being a dumb kid, I didn't really know how to say to people I wanted more plot-focused content, so I just went around saying I wanted to watch a show that matters pretty frequently. I would constantly just tell people, none of the things that I watch matter. And I think they kind of assumed I was a weirdly depressed child, which I wasn't, but this need for story is what drove me to anime in the first place. But I think that's probably pretty common over here in the West, to have like some show that was a gateway drug that gave you a taste for that good shit. But honestly, now it's more common for shows to be serialized, especially now that anime is readily watchable. So I hated this episodic content less and less as I got older, especially as Western plots seem to kind of get worse and worse when they were serialized. Okay, quick tangent. Is it just me, or since Game of Thrones have most of the hated shows been serialized? Like, people hate bad plots more than shit concepts, because yeah, people shit on Big Bang Theory all day, but that doesn't get half the hate of something poorly written that's pretending to be good. But I guess that goes for anime as well. Like, no one scrutinizes a trash gag anime, but shows like this and this just get all the hate. Like, there's almost this guise of, oh, where did this go wrong? Why is this plot not as good as they thought it was? Oh, look at how they failed with this. But when it comes to episodic content, it's almost like no one really cares, especially if it's just like, oh yeah, it's just bad. Like, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people on this site breaking apart shows like this or like this, and those are fun to see how bad they are, but I feel like no one really cares as much as people get genuinely upset, practically hate-filled for, let's say, the end of Game of Thrones, or for this show that's gone on too long, or this show that was bad originally. I mean, maybe it has something to do with the expectations of a good story, but I mean, it feels like if someone truly hates a show, it's more likely to be serialized, not episodic, right? Oh, and if you don't hate this video, go ahead and hit those YouTube buttons for me. Appreciate you. Okay, so Monster of the Week, yeah? It's a term coined in 1963, not in Japan, but by Twilight competitor The Outer Limits, using the catchphrase, a new monster each week to try to compete with the spectacle of Twilight Zone, right? Makes enough sense? You see this? Looks cool? But, like, this entire time, I thought it was a phrase used for old tokusatsu stuff, and I'm sure there's some Japanese equivalent for back then, right? And like, look, I've looked, I can't find it, but I mean, as much as it fits for this kind of thing, when I think of Monster of the Week or Villain of the Week, I think of like Penny and Stocking, Super Sentai, Godzilla, Precure, Digimon, Scooby-Doo. And I mean, like, one of the first things I think of is Power Ranger, right? I mean, maybe that's just me, but still, that's based off of old tokusatsu. So yeah, let me know if you know what the Japanese term is for it, and hey, maybe it's older, I may just be bad at looking this stuff up, right? So when it comes to Kaiju number 8, I'm gonna pull the manga reader card. It's one of my favorite recent manga, but until I watched the anime, I didn't even consider the connection to all this other media. Like, that may sound dumb, but I just liked it as it is, its own thing. But in context of animation, it finally clicked with me that it kind of stood out, as weird as it may sound, that it isn't a Monster of the Week show. I mean, there are monsters, like, every week it airs, but I mean, it's not episodic, right? Or in this specific example I'm trying to make, there's no episodic content with it. Does that make sense? Maybe not. Okay, here, let me explain. Most shows, Western, Eastern, or otherwise, have aspects inspired by differing formats, and episodic content seems to create some pretty freaking iconic characters, like literally iconic, where the more serialized the show seems, the more plot-driven it seems. And neither of those is bad, but okay, here's a graphic so you know I'm right. Okay, so let's start here, where there's episodic content in episodic shows. What you get is purely episodic. You get shows mentioned before, like SpongeBob, Psyche, Pop Team Epic, the true Monster of the Week shows where nothing really changes. The world can still be built, but the focus is almost always on watching the main character deal with something new each week. This type of content usually builds a huge following and literal iconography around the characters specifically. Now, if you pull back, over here what you get is episodic shows with a little bit of plot. A lot of Western kids shows have actually been riding this angle lately, where the show is episodic, but maybe there's some overarching plot. It helps show the character that the episodic content is built, reacting and dealing with more dramatic stakes. But nothing too big will normally happen outside of a season finale, and even then, the status quo itself often stays about the same. Mostly resets at the end of each episode. These are shows where you often get some pretty big fandoms following them if people like the reactions to the plot that does show up. And most of the episodic content that I'm talking about falls under this category. Not many shows are SpongeBob or Pop Team Epic, where you get the full reset with every episode, maybe even every scene. So what you're asking me? You're saying that shows that focus on plot can't have as good characters? Are you dumb? Well, yeah. And yeah? Well, clearly that isn't really true. The good characters thing, not the dumb thing. It's just there's a different type of focus on the characters. A lot, but absolutely not even close to all plot-driven shows, can struggle from time to time to slow down and show the characters in different situations, where episodic content just gets to that by default. And look, I still do prefer shows written like this, but you can get shows where you're thinking of the characters and you think to yourself, I want to see the character enjoying this, or I wonder how they'd react to dealing with mundane chores. And look, you don't have to know how Walter White does his laundry to know that these scenes are fantastically well written. But in the end, if the show feels too fast-paced for the character or the viewer, we may want more time slowing down and spending time with the characters, seeing them do their thing. So what am I advocating for then? Well, to give the most clear example I can, Mob and baseball. Like, here you can get shows like Mob Psycho 100 or Kaguya, where it starts off as a premise-based gag manga with some heart and probably intent on the author to progress, but as you keep watching the bits spill into the next over and over until what you get is just a plot where the whole thing was set up to get to know these characters pretty damn well. New characters may show up and we may get some more episodic chapters or gags, but the status quo will almost always progress from episode to episode. Then you can also get the baseball episode, or the fishing episode, culture fair episode, or, beach episode for the fan service. These types of episodes are often controversial because of the filler feeling of them, but to be honest, yeah, they can be annoying if that's not what you want, especially if you're watching week to week and you're like, wait, I have to wait an extra 7 days to start the main character death arc? But honestly, I like these moments where we just get to see the characters unwind and, bond, or just have time to relax that will make the later moments between the characters hit that much harder. With the asterisk being that it's not actual filler, and not every show's gonna have the ability to slow down. I mean, some of these plots are actually just too fast-paced to give the characters time to slow down and have lunch with one another. Even the term Monster of the Week, fighting a monster every week, isn't a slow, relaxing thing. But you know what I think does have time to slow down? Okay, so stick with me for just a little bit and you'll see what I'm getting at. After how many years thinking I disliked all forms of low-stress, formulaic content, while watching this, I realized I didn't really hate it. I loved moments like this, or like this. So I'd love it if they took the montages like this and stretched them out, or giving us an episode after this, where we get to see them on a more relaxed mission to go hunt something small like this, instead of just this huge ordeal. Or just showing us Kafka trying to do what he did with the mushrooms and not be able to find anything as easily. Or just seeing more of how he could help in that manner. There are shows like Devilman Crybaby, Mob Psycho, or Avatar that used some form of Monster of the Week intermittently to build characters before shit hits the fan. And look, I'm someone that would watch a show that was just them on the boat in between islands in One Piece. So I find a lot of joy in seeing the characters I like just interact. I think that's the whole reason we get a show like Slime Diaries or Attack on Titan Middle School or Isekai Quartet. But all that being said, I don't think that in this case that's even really needed. Because yeah, it did take this to give me the Godzilla flashbacks necessary to realize that there could be a place for Monster of the Week in Kaiju number 8. But that's kind of it. It made me realize something. But that realization was more about how I feel than what would actually be best for the show. Because let's face it, the statement that episodic content is needed to build these characters is just plain wrong. The more I went back and watched or researched, the more I realized that sure, my point that it could have space for episodic content stands, but I could not be more wrong in insinuating that Kaiju number 8 would be better just because it had it. I mean, look at what we did get. We get this, whoa, cool eyes. Oh, that's ominous. Is that a smile? I clearly have family issues. I don't care. That girl's cute as fuck. Naoya Matsumoto clearly does a good enough job building characters, and it's those characters being well written that make me want more episodes like this or like this. I do think there's a place for some of that Monster of the Week here, but honestly, it's just because the season's ending that I'm thinking to myself that I want more. And a baseball episode isn't needed for these characters to be so well built, because let's be honest, the whole grid thing helped me illustrate how I felt, but that's not how it works. Not that simply anyway. I mean, all shows are episodic, right? Like, that's kind of how weekly broadcast episodes work. Otherwise, it's just like a movie, and I mean, even then movies can be episodic. Like, you get what I mean. It's not that simple. People are going to continue writing shows in all sorts of formats, a coming-of-age story, a story about daily lives of high school boys, misadventures of a psychiku, that one guy that got reincarnated, or the other one, or just a story about a guy that really likes chess. I think what Kaiju number 8 made me realize is that I spent most of my life biased against something as dumb as a format. There's a place for all these formats in some form of media, so I think the real realization is that as long as the writer is good, the format honestly just doesn't matter. Have a good night. Drive safe. Hey, thanks for watching. Had a lot of fun making this video. It made me realize a few things about video making that I really enjoy, and I'm looking forward to my next few videos, as weird as that may sound. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you liked it. I can't say I've always hated episodic content, because I only really did when I was little, but Kaiju number 8 finally helped me put into words what, like, that actual feeling was. So I guess the moral of the story is show your kids good plots, I guess?